Hello, I'm Brigham Avery. Welcome to Hollywood and Ivy, where Sunset Boulevard meets Addison and Clark. The show where we get to know celebrity Cub fans from the entertainment world as we take you from Wrigley Field to the red carpet. Today's guest is an undeniable star of the stage, television, and motion picture world. His resume includes a Tony Award for Glengarry Glen Ross on Broadway. His multiple Emmy nominations include work on The Last Don and The Rat Pack. He's worked with Steven Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola, Billy Crystal, Tom Hanks, and Al Pacino. He's hosted Saturday Night Live and has a 30-year featured reoccurring role on The Simpsons. Born in Chicago, raised in Cicero, and most importantly, a Cubs fan of over 60-plus years, welcome Joe Mantegna. Welcome Joe Mantegna to Hollywood and Ivy. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Brigham.
Joe, please pinpoint as best you can your earliest memory of being a Chicago Cubs fan.
Wow. You know, some of it I think is chronicalized, if that's such a word, because I remember there's a photo of me. I think I'm like about 7, 8 years old. I'm in front of a black and white television, and there's the shot. Well, the magic of
we have it.
The magic of
yes.
Yeah. So that goes pretty far back, and I also remember it was shortly thereafter, not long after. My dad and I, my dad was the one that made me a Cub fan. Could be a dad, a mom, whoever it is in your family that ultimately decides what kind of team you're going to follow in your life. So for my dad, it was the Cubs. So I remember one summer we went to 10 games, and I remember thinking 10 games, that was great. And the Cubs lost every single one of them. Oh, and I remember when he asked me to go to the 11th game late that summer, I refused because at that age, I firmly believed it was my fault that they won the 10, because I thought, what's the constant? It's me. It had to be me. So we never made it to that 11th game.
The Cubs complex was born that
day.
I
guess so. That came on early, the Cubs complex. But that's so I go back pretty far. I'd say, you know, I learned how to walk, and then I learned how to follow the Cubs.
Tell us about your first impression and earliest memory of Wrigley Field. The ivy, the lack of lights.
Yeah,
as a kid, what do you remember first?
Well,
and most?
You know, it's magical. I mean, to walk in to this day. I mean, to me, in other words, if they were going to dedicate, let's say, a church to baseball, it should be Wrigley Field. It might be a close between Wrigley and Fenway. You know, at least American League. Cathedrals of baseball. But I'll tell you one. When I did research for the play Bleacher Bums, which is a play I conceived back in 1977 with this group, the Organic Theater Company, I did a lot of interviews as research for the play. And I remember talking to Jack Brickhouse, the great Cubs announcer, Hall of Fame announcer.
Of course.
And he told me the story about how there was this blind guy that used to come to all the games, and ultimately became an announcer. He became a character in our play, actually. He was a huge Cub fan. But then they finally were able to kind of give him vision. So they were all excited to find out what his reaction was going to be the first time he came to Wrigley Field with vision. Because before he'd just come and hear the game. And he said two things which stuck with me, which kind of goes to your question. He said, first of all, he was taken by how green everything was, the color green. And that it was just so much more than he expected, because here was this expanse of the grass, the ivy, you know, the scoreboard. And he says, and the other thing that impressed him was how normal-sized the players were, because in his mind, hearing the roar of the crowd and the excitement of the ball game, he imagined that these men were behemoths.
Bigger than life.
They were bigger than life, that they were giants, you know, sliding into the bases and hitting the ball. And now I can actually see them and think, oh, they're just normal-sized human beings. So, I mean, I thought his first impression of seeing a game at Wrigley, in a way, trumps anybody's first impression, you know.
As a kid, growing up in Cicero, was baseball your first love? Did you play Little League?
I did. I played Little League. And I was very mediocre. You know, all catch, no hit kind of thing, you know. And I played Pony League. And then I started to get into almost like pre-Legion kind of ball. I mean, I really liked baseball, loved baseball. My career kind of ended when we were playing a game, and I was a left fielder. Another guy was center fielder. I still remember his name, Eddie Schultz. We were both running for a fly ball. Top speed, full speed running. We collided. you know, neither of us looking at each other, of course, looking at the ball. His forehead hits me in the jaw. I get knocked unconscious. I came to right away, but they said in the ambulance, they were asking me questions like, you know, what's your name? And I'm answering everything correctly. Then until they got to, what's the date? And I said, it's February. And it was actually June. But what happened was that I suffered partial amnesia.
Oh.
I lost all the months from February of that year till June of that year. So I lost
Holy
basically
cow.
6 months of my life. And it sounds weird. At the time it was weird. But of course, as months go on, you realize who can remember 6 months of your life, a specific year anyway. But I think the writing was on the wall that maybe baseball is, is a lot of fun, but maybe it's not something I should, pursue on a regular basis.
Now, what you just described to me in that time frame, at the time the '59 White Sox, the Go-Go Sox, had won the pennant, played the
Right.
Dodgers in the World Series, and the '63 world champion Monsters of the Midway Bears
Right.
had won. So was there any competition for first place in your heart, or was it always the Cubs?
No, it was always the Cubs, because I think being a Cub fan, that's a unique kind of a thing. It's that whole thing about, liking the underdog, you know what I mean? And there's a certain pride you take. It's almost, I've always said it, yeah, and other people have said it, it's easy to like the Yankees. It's easy to like the Dodgers. They have a history of championships, championships during your lifetime. And I remember when my mother lived to be 101 years old.
Amazing.
And I remember she was in her 100th year when the Cubs finally, closed the deal.
Incredible.
And I remember being interviewed that year when it looks like the Cubs might actually get to the big show here,
Sure.
you know what I mean? And I remember saying during an interview, look, my mother, the Cubs were on an eight-year losing streak when my mother was born, and
Right.
she was about to turn 100. I says, let's do it. Let's close it for her.
Now
for
is the
nothing
time.
else, And fortunately they did, and my mom, was able to appreciate that
Amazing.
in her 100th and first year to take in a Cubs win.
As a young man attending DePaul University, which is a stone's throw, Lincoln Park is, from Wrigley Field, how special was the summer of '69 to you?
I was at the Goodman School of Drama at the time, so in other words, it ultimately became part of DePaul University. I left the school that year as well because I got cast in the play Hair, which was my first professional job.
Oh.
So now I'm in the play Hair, which at the Schubert Theater, downtown Chicago, and I'm playing the character Berger, which is one of the leads in the play. And in the second act, because Hair was a free-form kind of play, I would wear a tie-dyed Ernie Banks t-shirt, because he was always my favorite player.
Perfect.
So I wore this tie-dyed Ernie Banks t-shirt. Well, sure enough, Ernie Banks and his wife comes to see the play one night.
Wow.
And at the curtain call, and because it was Hair, you can do stuff like this. At the curtain call, I stopped the crowd from applauding. I said, we have a special guest in the audience. I'm wearing his shirt. Mr. Ernie Banks, please stand up. And of course, he stood up with his wife, and the place went nuts because, like I said, the Cubs were well in first place at the time. Anyway, Ernie invites me then to come see a game a couple days later at the ballpark, which I do. And that was exciting in itself. I was in the dugout. I got to meet Ron Santo. I got to meet all the players. Needless to say, the end of '69 didn't kind of work out as we had hoped. But I'll never forget that experience. And that was the first time I met Ernie Banks and ultimately got to know him, a little bit better over the following years.
Now that leads me to my next question, Joe. Will there ever be anybody that will replace Ernie Banks, especially now that guys like Anthony Rizzo and Javi Baez have delivered a World Series? Is there any chance of him being replaced?
Well, I had a soft spot for Rizzo just partly because he's Italian and he has that kind of spirit and all. The same thing with Joe Madden even. I mean, back when he was managing, because his real name, I think, is Madoni or something. He's got an Italian. And I've told him that. I remember when I was at Wrigley Field a few years ago, and I said to him, I said, Joe, I says, I'm here, you're here, Rizzo's here. We got 3 Italians with the Cubs. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's win it again.
The Rat Pack at Wrigley.
Yeah, exactly. It's like any fan of a team. As soon as they put on that uniform, they become dear to your heart. In other words, it could be a player that you hated when they were on the other team. They get traded to the Cubs. All of a sudden, well, I kind of like this guy. You know what I mean?
He's your guy.
He's my guy
That's
now.
right.
So I've had favorites over the years, but I mean I embrace them all, and I go back to a lot of the old time players. Tony Taylor.
Fast forward now, Joe, to 8 years later, 1977. There's a play called Bleacher Bums that you co-wrote about the adventures of characters in the outfield at Wrigley Field. Dennis Franz was in it. Gary Sandy was in it. A lot of famous people. Talk about how that production materialized.
Well, it was a play that I conceived. I actually had come up with this idea. I was with this group called the Organic Theater in Chicago, And it was the end of the year, and all our grants had run out. So in other words, the money that we kind of used to put together plays had kind of run out. So I remember our director, Stuart Gordon, said, he called us all together and said, does anybody have an idea for a play that will cost us next to nothing? And I had been ruminating this idea of, because I've been going to a lot of Cub games, sitting in the cheapest seats in the bleachers, and I remember thinking, here's this team that's fairly mediocre at the time, in the 70s there, and I'm thinking, yet the place is packed. We're all paying to get in here. If I can just get a 1% of these people to go see a play, what's the magic? Why are they here to following basically a team that doesn't close
Why are they
the
so
deal?
attractive?
Why are they so attractive? And then I realized what's going on around me, and it was almost as entertaining as what was going on the field.
Well, I think Harry would approve. I dedicate this one to all the Bleacher Bums, past, present, and future.
That's why I had this idea of, if we could capture this thing of these group of people who, they're so diverse. You got the rich guy, the poor guy, different ethnicities, different this, that. What brings them together
All
for
the people
this?
playing hooky from work and school.
Whatever it may be. So I thought, this is such a cast of characters. This will make for an interesting play. And so I brought it up as an idea. They all agreed this might be worth something. I said, let's all go to my section in the bleachers. You tell me if this is not a play. Ultimately created the play Bleacher Bums, which we opened that year in summer '77. It became a huge hit. We took it to New York City. To this day, we're in 2021 right now. I mean, the play still, I still get royalty checks from, places in Guam where maybe some army base has decided to do it in the summer, or some summer stock company will do it. So I'm very happy that worked out, that the play Bleacher Bums.
Is it fair to say that you laid the foundation for a man named Harry Carey that made the Bleachers and Wrigley Field's lifestyle on WGN for so many years?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I've laid it. I might have put a brick in that foundation, if nothing else.
A brick house.
Yeah, brick house, exactly. But yeah, and so we've even updated the play at various times and because Brick House was part of it in the original.
Oh, have you?
We brought Harry Carey in later kind of productions of it. But yeah, that was a wonderful experience, and so it lives on.
How much fun is it now for you, Joe, going back and being an established celebrity at Wrigley Field, throwing out the first pitch, having all the Cubs come out and get your autograph, singing the seventh inning stretch, and as a grown-up, what is that experience like? And is that perhaps the best environment, I'm talking about Wrigley Field, to be a celebrity in?
Yeah, I mean, well, I feel very blessed that way. I mean, because here I think back of when I was this little kid, here where I'm throwing, I don't know what year that was. My hair was still dark back then. So I've done it probably 15, 16 years, on and off, throwing out that first pitch. But yeah, that's a kid's dream, to be able to go out there, to be a fan and think, geez, wouldn't it be cool to be that guy? When you're a kid and you see somebody come out there wearing the jersey and throwing out the pitch. And to think that that's actually happened for me numerous times, and that I've gotten to know the owners and the managers and the players and the announcers. Yeah, as a baseball fan, there's certainly nothing better. I never take that for granted. I know that's kind of rarefied air. And so, yeah, it's a wonderful position to be in, and I'm forever grateful. It's one of the perks of being in showbiz.
Being you.
Being me.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's good to be me.
That's right. Now, since 2016, Joe, in your opinion, will the Cubs forever, as they say in Vegas, be playing with the house's money? Is your soul satisfied? Is all that's wrong been right in the world?
Personally,
so on and so forth?
Personally, mine is, because I have to think. I have to think of my mom and think it took her 100 years for the deal to get closed. So why should I be greedier than that? In other words, I'm not going to be critical. I'm not going to be jaded to the point of like, what's the matter? Why aren't they doing it again? Come on.
I couldn't agree more. My soul is
My
totally
feeling
satisfied.
I feel fortunate because for all we know, it could have gone on for another 100 years. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So that was a special team, a special time. I mean, yes, God willing, and hopefully they're going to close the deal a lot sooner than another 80, 90 years from now. But if not, I'm good with it.
I would say that if they were going to win another World Series, what I would like to see would be a crosstown classic with the White Sox. Because what we know is there have been the Yankees versus the Mets, there's been the Cardinals
Right.
versus the Royals, even in interstate.
Right.
But nothing is as intense and polar opposite
Right.
as Cub fans and Sox fans. The two stadiums are 8.1 miles apart.
Right.
How amazing a spectacle, a passionate spectacle would that be?
Well, that's the final speech in the play Bleacher Bums. And I got that through Brick House, because I asked Brick House, I said, when I interviewed him, I said, what's your dream? What's your dream as a Cub fan? And he told me his dream, and I incorporated it into the play. And it's our character, the character Greg, the blind character in the play. At the very end of the play, he basically says, it's the World Series. It's the Cubs versus the White Sox. It goes 7 games. We're in the 7th game. The bases are loaded. The Cubs are down by 3. They bring in Ernie Banks out of retirement. He hits a home run into my lap, and the Cubs win. You know,
how perfect.
And that was Brickhouse's dream, you know, as a Cub announcer. And so, of course, we put that into play, and it became that character's dream. And it was perfect. I remember, and when we do performances of that, especially in Chicago, the audience would, of course, stand up and cheer just at the end of that speech.
We're visiting with Joe Mantegna on Hollywood and Ivy. We'll be back with more after this. Welcome back to Hollywood and Ivy. Sitting here with Joe Mantegna, having a pleasant visit. Joe, thank you again for being here. What are your thoughts so far on David Ross as Cubs manager?
Well, you know what, I think he's right. I mean, it's in other words, what I like about David is his spirit. He's like a working man's kind of guy. You know what I mean? It was, first of all, the position he played as a player, the fact that he's got that kind of, and also you have to look at the big picture. By big picture, I mean that when you evaluate the Cubs, you can't base it on a season. You can't base it on 2 seasons.
It's a side sample,
Yeah, you got to base it on like an era. You know, we'll see. Let's see how it plays out. We've got. I mean, I go back to when they had, you know, manager by committee. You know, when they had like 5 different guys that they would float around. I mean, so they've tried all kinds of different things. My feeling is, let's give this guy a good run at it, good shot. Let's see what happens.
We had some video that you took for us, and it's a pretty impressive collection that you have, and it's a collection of autographed baseballs.
Oh yeah, here we go.
The magic of television right there.
There's my Ernie Banks. There's another Ernie Banks.
And it's an anthology.
Here's one to Joe.
That's Ron Santo, yeah.
There's to Joe, Billy Williams.
And that's 1987, the year Billy went into the Hall of Fame.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Now that ball, that's a Hall of Fame ball. Kerry Wood, as you see, it says 20K 5698. The reason that's a Hall of Fame ball is I threw out the first pitch at the game that Kerry Wood struck out 20 ball players, which tied the Major League record at the time. So, I mean, and not knowing that was going to happen. I mean, it was a Thursday. It was a rainy game against Houston. I happened to be in Chicago. The Cubs called me and said, hey, we heard you're in town. Would you like to throw out the first pitch? I think they called me like on Wednesday, the next day. I said, great, yeah, sure. I'd love to, you know. But here it was. I threw out the first pitch. I had Kerry signed, date the ball. Thank you, great, good luck.
Right.
Little did we know.
Amazing.
And then, of course, they called me up into the booth, and I called the 7th and 8th inning up in the radio booth. They came out with a DVD later of that game, of course. And you can hear me screaming on there, 18, oh, 18, oh.
20-year-old Kerry Wood gets Derek Bell for his 20th strikeout, a National League record. They're mobbing Kerry Wood at the mound. The young Texan has blanked the Astros 2-0.
But that baseball, that conceivably could be a Hall of Fame baseball. So, I mean, I'm very proud to have that one.
That was May 6th, 1998. Kerry Wood strikes out 20 Houston Astros.
Right.
I would say, and I'd like to get your opinion, that's the most dominating pitching performance of all time. And it's also underrated because Roger Clemens had also struck out 20 in 1986, but he had given up 3 hits and 1 run. Kerry Wood gave up 1 hit, and it was against the Houston Astros, who had Biggio and Bagwell, 2 future Hall of Famers.
Right.
So I think because of his future that he didn't have the resume that Roger Clemens, but that's the most dominating pitching performance of all time in baseball.
Certainly the most I'd ever seen. And as I recall, there was one moment, I don't know if I remember, it was a drop third strike, or they just tipped it, and the catcher just dropped it out of the middle. But I mean, there was a 21st strikeout that should have happened, but it happened earlier in the game, so nobody thought anything about it. But it was like, oh man, if that one little thing would have, you know.
Perfect game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joe, we're here live at Rush Street in Culver City in the shadows of the beautiful Sony lot. And you actually have a long history with the management here and the ownership of this place. Talk about that.
The owner of this place, I've known him before he was born, if that makes sense. And that's because his mother and I went to high school together.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah, his mother, Lynn, God bless her. She owns a plethora
Of bars in Chicago.
Of bars in Chicago.
Mothers and the Lodge, to name a
Mothers, the
few,
Lodge,
right?
and yeah, just a special one called the River Shannon. And it's special to me because when I was a student at the Goodman School of Drama, I and 2 other acting students, we lived above the River Shannon.
The River Shanty, is that
The
what
River
it's called?
Shannon.
The River Shannon,
River
okay.
Shannon, Irish, kind of Irish pub bar, great
On
bar in
Armitage,
Chicago.
perhaps? Is that
Yeah,
the-
on Armitage. And so here I am. This the year is like 1967, 68. I'm living above this bar as a
Right.
student. Now jump cut many years later. Now Lynn, now owns this bar, calls me and says, Joe, they want to name the street after you in front of the bar. Oh, and here we go, honorary Joe Mantegna Boulevard. Well, actually, that shot, that I think is that. That's when the street's named after me in Cicero.
Oh,
That's
gotcha.
the Joe Mantegna Boulevard. The other one I think is Joe Mantegna Way.
Oh,
and
you
that's-
got 2.
You got 2. I got
Holy
one in
cow.
Cicero, one in Chicago.
Yes.
But anyway, and Lynn's son, you know, Brian, this is his place. He opened a place called Rush Street, which is, anybody who's from Chicago knows Rush Street.
So when you're here,
definitely
make sure and stop by.
There's a bastion now for Chicago fans right
A
here.
haven,
A
as
haven,
they
right
say.
here in Culver City. And it's wonderful. And so I have such a soft spot for Lynn and now for Rush Street.
Let's go to 1991, January.
Yeah.
You host some comedy sketch show
Yeah.
called Saturday Night Live.
Right.
That was the inception of the skit The Superfans
Yes.
and De Bears.
The Bears.
Talk about your memories of hosting SNL.
Well, that was obviously that's a dream come true for any actor to be asked to host SNL. And then when they came to me with that skit, you know, it was like they figured, well, you're from Chicago and the Bears are very popular. It was during the football season. Why don't we do this skit about the Bears? And I did it, and I thought it was be great fun, and you know, and here
You did it with George. George Wendt is in it.
George. Well, George wasn't in the original
Oh,
skit.
okay.
It was
Farley.
Chris Farley.
Yeah.
And Robert Smigel, who wrote the skit.
Right.
And Mike Myers.
That's right.
But what had happened is, I just thought the skit was going to be fun and people from Chicago would get a kick out of it. Well, after that show aired, I mean, Chicago went nuts. I mean, everything was like, they reran it, I guess, in a cycle on the radio and TV. And pretty soon you go to Chicago, there'd be signs saying, the Bears, the Bulls, the Paul University, the everything. I mean, it really resonated. So then what happened is George then hosted the show a couple weeks later.
Right.
And of course they wanted to bring the skit back
Yeah.
as my brother. So I was Bill Swirsky, he was Bob Swirsky. And then George, he would continually kind of do this.
Oh, yeah.
They had always asked me to do it with him.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, I was living in California. I was shooting a series at the time. I
Right.
couldn't keep flying into
And
New
you're a
York.
Cubs fan, Joe.
Yeah, well, but still, the Bears have a
course.
soft spot for
Kidding.
me. And I wound up doing another one with him and I think Danny DeVito. We wound up doing one when Danny hosted the show. So I did.
I'd love
two
to
of
see
those.
that image. That'd be great, you three guys.
But that was great. That, to be able to immortalize that skit and be part of, you know, Bears folklore. That's also kind of a nice thing.
Since 2006, you and another great Cub fan in Chicago, and Gary Sinise, have done something very special in Washington, D.C. You host together the Memorial Day celebration. How did that arise?
Yeah, well, actually, for me, it started in 2002 when Charles Durning, the great actor Charles Durning, a World War II hero, asked me if I would participate in this National Memorial Day concert in Washington, D.C. as an actor to just do these readings. And I didn't even know what it was. And I thought, well, all right, I loved Charles, and I said, yeah, okay, that's great. You know, I'll pass up watching the Indianapolis 500 this year and a barbecue and go to Washington. Well, little did I know, I show up for this concert, and I realized here's 200,000 people show up for this concert on the West Lawn of the Capitol. And my job at that, you know, remember this was right after 9/11, I had to read the words of 4 New York firemen who had lost their sons
Oh, my.
in 9/11. And so I'm on the stage reading their words, and they're sitting in the front row in front of 200,000 people
Goodness
live
gracious.
in their dress uniforms with their wives. And I'm saying lines like, it's a good day when you're on the site and you find the scrap of your son's uniform. And behind me, the Washington Symphony Orchestra is playing Mozart's Requiem, and next to me are these huge movie screens showing the planes flying into the World Trade Center.
Oh.
Well, all I could say is when I got through that, my knees were shaking. It really affected me, and I thought to myself, this was not an acting gig. I was recounting history. And it was so moving for me and so important, and it made me realize how important Memorial Day was. Because I thought of all these men and women who've given their lives over the course of our nation's history so that we can even do this.
Yes.
So from that point on, I told them, I said, hey, if you ever want to use me again, I'm here. Well, as it turned out, they asked me to come back the next year. I wound up hosting it my 3rd year, and then told them, I said, you know what? You know who got to get involved? Gary Sinise, because nobody does more for our military in Hollywood than Gary Sinise. So they agreed to that. We brought Gary in. He played with his band that year. And then I asked Gary, I said, Gary, what would you think about hosting this now with me from this point on? And knowing him as I knew he would, he said, I'm in, let's do it. And we're actually next Saturday, we're going to do.
Amazing.
We do it again, because we have to do it virtually this
That's
year
right.
due to, obviously, what's going on. But next Saturday, he and I it will be my 20th year doing it.
Congratulations.
And it'll be his I guess his 17th probably.
Let's go to season 3, episode 4, some show called The Simpsons.
Okay.
The emergence and the inception and the arrival of Fat Tony in Springfield.
Yeah, Fat
How
Tony.
did that character get created, and how much of that is you improving, and talk about what it's like doing an episode of The Simpsons, the table reading, the whole process of that,
Right,
because
right,
I've
right.
heard it's fantastic.
Well, I mean, it really is. I mean, I got lucky in that it was early on. It was, I think part of it, the reason they probably thought of me for that character was the film Godfather 3 had just come out in December of the year before. This was like February, like 2 months later. And they wanted to introduce this gangster character, and they thought, well, who better maybe to get than the guy who was the main gangster in this Godfather movie. So they called me, and I wasn't even familiar with The Simpsons at the time. But
You
I looked
weren't?
no, I wasn't. I wasn't really privy to those first couple seasons,
yeah.
but I looked them up and thought, oh, this is really fun. This is kind of cute. I mean, I have daughters, so I mean, they were more
Yeah.
into like, American Girl dolls and stuff.
Of course.
So I said, of course I'll do it. And I did it. I remember showing up, and at that time, they were shooting it in the basement at Fox. They were like, they were very low on the totem pole as a show. So I mean, they had like a circle of music stands, and we all stood in a semicircle and read our lines. And when I was about to start, they weren't actually giving me any direction in terms of what to do, how to do it. And I thought, well, I don't want to sound like Joey Zaza, the character from Godfather 3, and I don't want to sound like me. So I thought to myself, who I drew upon was I had an Uncle Willie, God bless him, who's been like a father figure for a big part of my life. And due to having a bout with throat cancer years before, my Uncle Willie talked like this.
Oh, my.
So I thought to myself, I think this is the voice that I might try to use.
You perfected.
So I started doing the first lines as the character with this voice. And nobody stopped me. The director didn't say, well, wait a minute, what are you doing here? So I just kept at it and thought, all right, I guess they're buying it, so I'll just do it. We did it, we shot the episode, done, thank you, sounds like fun, I can't wait for it to come out, I'll look for it. Little did I know that they would come back to me some months later and say, we kind of like that, it came out, maybe, would you do another one? Yeah, of course I'll do another one. Well, that was 30 years ago. I just did a read-through a couple of weeks ago for my next episode. I've been doing it for 30 years. And all I can say is when you're able to do that table read, like in other words, when we all get together, now of course, they're not in the basement anymore. They have the Marge Simpson building. I mean, they have their own sound stage.
It's a prize they give away on game shows. You can go and watch,
Oh,
or if
yeah.
you win, you can watch a reading
Exactly,
of The Simpsons.
and
a
it's the
table
best
read.
show in town.
Absolutely.
Because you go and you get to see all the actors in there and around the table.
Right.
And you get to see it live, and that's a rare thing because now we don't all have to be there to record. You can record your stuff separately. So to hear everybody in one room do it, that's a real thrill. So that's my longest running character is Fat Tony on The Simpsons, and I'm still doing it, and hope to keep doing it.
Some of the memorable lines of Fat Tony are, Bart, is it wrong to steal a loaf of bread to feed your family? Let's say you got a really big family. Let's say your family don't like bread. Let's say they like cigarettes. Is that your Uncle Willie? Did you add that humor?
Well, Uncle Willie was anybody who knew Uncle Willie knew that, he was one of a kind, and there's a certain, he could have very well been the guy to deliver those lines. So it all worked out, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of Uncle Willie and Fat Tony. And this next episode is actually a big Fat Tony episode, so I'm looking
Oh, really?
forward-
Can you give us a little sneak peek of?
Well, let's put,
Is he on a diet?
I'll give you a sneak peek.
Okay.
The sneak peek is the little baby, Maggie. Maggie never was baptized, which means Maggie. So that's all I got to say.
Holy cow! Godfather flashbacks.
We'll
Godfather
see.
meets
We'll see.
Springfield.
We'll see.
Amazing. In 2007, you started a show. You took over from Manti Patinkin. You took, it was Criminal Minds that you started on.
Right.
That, my young friend, is a symbol of victory. You're not a baseball fan, are you?
And that was a run that was 16, 17 years on
15
that show?
well, the show
years?
was 15 years. I did it for 13 years. And yeah, for me, it was a blessing because, first of all, I've traveled a lot all my life, and I have 2 children, 2 daughters. My oldest daughter has autism, and that's one thing that, you know, it's been
Close to your heart.
close to my heart and a big factor in our lives.
Yeah.
And it was great in terms of the travel when they were young because we would take them everywhere. They would go with us. They've been to Russia. They've been to all over Europe, Canada, the United States. And it was good for for both daughters, but especially even my daughter with autism because we'd learn different kinds of therapies and different things and educational things that
From
were
different
very helpful.
cultures.
Different cultures.
Isn't that
All of
amazing?
it was great. But as they got older, the travel became more and more difficult. So for me, it was kind of important if I could hopefully find a gig that keeps me in town where I can do more on a 9-to-5 kind of a gig. I really hope that could happen. And to find a good television show would be really key. And boy, did I find it with Criminal Minds because, you know, I thought it was well, to this day, it's one of the most syndicated shows in the world. It's
Netflix has it.
Oh, it's all
Yeah.
over the place. It's going to be on Paramount Plus. There's even talk now of even bringing the show back. We'll see. We're in talks right now.
Is there a podcast for it? Criminal Minds?
I don't know. I don't even. You
Right.
know, you're talking to a dinosaur.
just-
I barely know what a podcast is. But bottom line, I was happy to do it. It was a wonderful group of people. And I'm doing a series now for Amazon called Forget Normal, which deals with 3 young adults on the autism spectrum. And the actors actually have the different kind of degrees of that.
Amazing.
And it's a beautiful show by Jason Katims, who did Friday Night Lights and Parenthood.
Of course.
And so I love this show that I'm doing now, and it's about a topic that's near and dear to me. So I feel and we're shooting that here too. So I feel very, very blessed. I've had a very, very good life.
There was a show that came out this past year, one of my favorite documentaries. It's called The Last Dance. It was a chronicle of the Chicago Bulls championship run. You had a very impressive cameo in that, and it was a great story, but in the spirit of Hollywood, a lot of that ended up on the editing room floor. Talk about your cameo and what that was and the essence of the '98 Bulls.
Well,
The
that was
Last
great.
Dance.
I mean, I was lucky enough to actually get to know Michael Jordan a little bit because I was shooting the movie Baby's Day Out in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
And Michael there was the heyday of the Bulls, and his charity was having a big charity function. And they asked me if I would host it,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
since I was in town.
Right.
So I was able to go to the hotel where they had it, and
Uh-huh.
of course got to meet Michael and hear him basically just beat up on Patrick Ewing, who was a friend of
I'm
his.
sure.
but
Oh,
yet-
yeah. Oh, yeah.
but,
Yeah,
oh
yeah,
God,
no.
Michael just
He was a
punished him.
roaster. He was a roaster.
He really
Yeah.
roasted the hell out of him. But that was a great experience. And then well, I think the story I recount on the Last Dance, where I talk about how I'm shooting a movie now in Toronto.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And this was the year that the Bulls, that year.
They won
the year,
72. That was 95,
yeah,
96.
72. So
Yeah.
I'm up there making this movie. Now I find out that the general manager of the Toronto Raptors is Isaiah Thompson, who I
Chicago.
hated as a player because he was with the Pistons. But I also knew he had gone to St. Joseph's High School outside Chicago.
right.
Now in the 60s,
Westchester.
In Westchester. So I was in a band in the 60s. And we used to occasionally play at St. Joe's High School. So I thought to myself, this could be my in with Isaiah. You know, and I told our publicist on the movie, I said, call Isaiah or let them know that Joe Mantegna would love to be able to see, because the Bulls were going to be in town to play the Raptors.
That's right.
I'd love to, if I could just get tickets to see the game, it'd be so great. And mention that to Isaiah that maybe I'm a fan of St. Joe's High School. Well, sure enough, they said, oh, he'd love to meet you. He wants to give you his seats.
Mm-hmm.
So I go and meet Isaiah. I'm in his office. We reminisce about St. Joseph's High School. He gives me these courtside seats. Perfect.
Thousands of dollars.
Oh, yeah. And we're in the Sky Dome because they hadn't even built their regular place.
Mm-hmm.
So now and the place is jammed because you figure they want to see the Bulls. These are the best show in
Right,
town.
absolutely.
So I'm thinking, this is great. I already know Jordan. You know, I had met Phil Jackson. I figured the Worms playing. This is after the game. We'll all get together. We'll have a beer. You know,
How
and
cool.
We'll celebrate. You know, once again, we're moving toward the greatest year of basketball teams ever had. As it turned out, it was one of those games that the Bulls wound up
One of the
losing.
10 losses.
One of the 10 losses.
And it was to
that
Toronto,
game.
who was an expansion team. That was the first year of basketball in Canada.
And as I saw them walk off the court, I knew that the beer, everything was fading into the sunset. That this
There's
ain't-
going to be no
this ain't
postseason,
gonna happen.
no postgame.
The worm got thrown out of the game. I mean, it was just the worst. As I'm walking off the court like this, heading to my car, whatever, I see Isaiah, who's got a smile from here to here going, Joe Mantegna, you can have my seats anytime you want them when the Bulls are in town.
What a story.
And so I thought, well, okay. Still, it was a good year.
This is Hollywood and Ivy. We're here with Joe Mantegna. Back with more after this. Stick around. Back here live on Hollywood and Ivy, where Sunset Boulevard meets Addison and Clark. We've been visiting with Joe Mantegna this afternoon. Joe, you had your own restaurant here in Burbank called Taste Chicago. It was all kinds of Chicago food and Italian food, of course. Talk about that.
Well, it was my wife's dream to open up a restaurant, a Chicago-themed restaurant. A lot of it was going to be Italian food, only because of the nature of Italian beef sandwiches and deep dish pizza and all that. So 2003, we were able to open a restaurant in Burbank. We had a 16-year run with it, which was great. A lot of memories. And then she just got, it's a tough business. She decided, I think we've had enough. As it turned out, timing-wise, it kind of worked out once the, the COVID thing kind of happened, because we actually closed the restaurant 6 months or so prior to that. And it is where I saw the Cubs win the World Series.
You're taking my thunder now. So that was the location, Joe, is right next to Warner Brothers. So you guys had a lot of Hollywood people coming over all the time, correct?
A lot of Hollywood people. And I think, what I think was an interesting story involving the Cubs and Taste Chicago is this. That last game, that 7th game now,
yes.
Right? The Cubs are in Cleveland. Now, the Cubs offered me a ticket to come to...
They did?
Yeah, to come to Cleveland.
Did they fly you out there?
Well, I think I had to flown myself out there, but they gave me the ticket.
Oh, wow.
But I said, I can't. First of all, I was shooting a series at the time. I was doing Criminal Minds.
Game 7, right?
It was Game 7. It was a Thursday, whatever day of the week it was. I couldn't do it. But and the other reason was I really didn't want to go. My feeling was for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to be with the fans at Taste Chicago to see if the Cubs were going to win. Let me see it with the Chicago fans who've been coming to the restaurant for 16 years.
And paid their dues.
Paid their dues.
Yeah.
And the other reason was I didn't want to be stuck in Cleveland if the Cubs lost, because it would have killed me. I thought, here I am in Cleveland. The Cubs lost the World Series. I want to shoot myself. So I thought, no, better I be here. So anyway, I'm at the restaurant. As you can imagine, the restaurant's jammed. Every Cub fan in the area is there in the restaurant.
Yeah.
It's packed.
Right.
We're all hoping for the best. Now we're getting down into the later innings.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden...
And actually, this is...
Here it is.
Yeah.
Here's a clip of what's going on. Well, this is kind of what ultimately happened.
So
but prior to this...
Yes, where are you when this is going on? Why are you not in this?
Well, the reason I'm not in the shot, as it got to the point where when the game got tied up...
Right. In extra innings.
Extra innings. I'm freaked out. So now I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't be here. I can't.
The pressure was, you couldn't
now,
take it.
as you can imagine, all the news trucks are in our parking lot.
Oh, wow, okay.
Because they knew, here, this is the restaurant Taste Chicago. If the
Yeah,
Cubs
yeah.
wind up winning, this is the place to be.
Right.
So I go out into the Fox News truck. Because they were
you're in the
broadcasting
production
the
truck
game.
at this moment.
I'm in the production truck. The place is jammed with Cub fans, the restaurant. I'm alone in the truck with 2, probably Dodger fans or
Right.
Angel
That's
fans.
right.
Because they don't care, they're just showing this. And I'm watching it on the screen this big in the truck. And I asked him, do you mind if I says, I can't, I'm too nervous, I can't be in there.
Right.
Because I'm thinking if the Cubs lose, it'll kill me. So I'm watching, all of a sudden, and then all of a sudden the Cubs are, it looks like, oh my God. And I'm thinking, now I'm afraid to leave the truck. Because I'm thinking the Cubs got the lead. Maybe this could be it. So now I'm watching. It gets to that last ground ball. Oh, good ground. He throws. Oh,
Brian to Rizzo.
Brian to Rizzo. Rizzo catches it. I go nuts. I'm screaming. I'm in this little truck. I mean, the roof of the truck is right here. The screen is this big. I'm screaming and yelling, ah! And I whip open the door, and I look, and it's dead quiet. I look at the restaurant, and there's nothing going on. It's like...
Why was that?
Well, I don't know. I think I'm dreaming. I'm thinking, oh, it's all been a dream. It didn't happen. I'm going to wake up. The Cubs didn't win the World Series. This is all a dream. Then all of a sudden, the restaurant erupts, and people are screaming, and I hear this roar, and the champagne's hitting the windows. And I look, and the guys in the truck almost calmly say, Well, we're on a delay. They just saw it now. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that means anybody who's watching televised, I was able to see the Cubs win the World Series 10, 15 seconds before anybody else who watched this game, unless you were there or televised.
It's
So
good
I
to be
thought,
you.
It's good to be me.
Yeah.
I thought, like, all right, I was able to appreciate the Cubs winning the World Series 10, 15 seconds longer than anybody else.
Right. We had a podcast. I know you said you didn't know what a podcast was, but we had one live at your place.
Right,
if you
that's
remember.
right.
And you actually came on as Fat Tony, and we did a little commemoration in 2016.
Right.
And he said if they don't win this year, there's going to be a cement shoe shortage for the umpires. But that
Right.
kind of, I like to think that culminated that moment, and that kind of gave them the momentum
I would
for that
like to
final
think
run
Fat
in
Tony
August.
scared the hell out of them.
Exactly,
Yeah,
it scared the umpires and the competition.
Rightly so.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a great conversation. We've had these Cubs coasters here. I actually got one for you, and this is called a dugout mug, Joe. And for you.
It's made from a baseball
Yeah,
bat.
this is actually a barrel of a baseball bat.
Thank you.
So
I got
cheers to
something
you.
for you.
Oh, thank you.
And this is, anybody who knows the military, challenge coin. My
challenge
challenge coin, my star in the Walk of Fame, and Fat Tony.
Oh, it's
there
beautiful.
you go, Brigham.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
You're
Mantegna.
welcome. Thank you.
Pleasure being here.
My
So
pleasure.
cheers to you.
Go Cubs.
Cheers, go Cubs. Go to dugoutmugs.com. Thank you for being here. We'll see you guys next time on Hollywood and Ivy, where Sunset Boulevard meets Addison and Clark.
Well, you better get ready for a brand new day. Hey, Chicago, what do you say? The Cubs are gonna win today. They're singing, Go Cubs, go! Go Cubs, go! Hey, Chicago, what do you say? The Cubs are gonna win today. Go Cubs, go! Go Cubs, go! Hey, Chicago, what do you say? The Cubs are gonna win today. They got the power, they got the speed to be the best in the National League. Well, this is the year and the Cubs are real. So come on down to Wrigley Field. We're singing now. Go Cubs, go! Go Cubs, go! Hey, Chicago, what do you say? The Cubs are gonna win today. Go Cubs, go!
Hollywood and Ivy was filmed at Rush Street in Culver City. Rush Street, your Cubs destination in Southern California. Catering was provided by Taste of Aroma, the best pizza in Beverly Hills. Hollywood and Ivy is a presentation of Brigham Avery Productions.